All right, here we go. Welcome back to Cup of Joe, a series of Facebook Live conversations on topics that are among the most important to the constituents I work for, the Hampshire Franklin Worcester District. We launched this series in February to open up a new way for our team to get timely information to the people in our region. Check out my YouTube channel to catch up on the first 4 episodes. Today, I'm really excited to share that we have our first ever duo on Cup of Joe. We have Representative Mike Kushmerek and AARP's Massachusetts State Director and former House colleague, Representative Jen Benson. Rep. Kushmerek began his tenure as a state representative for the 3rd Worcester District in 2021 and represents Fitchburg and Lunenburg, 2 beautiful communities. Prior to his role in the state legislature, Rep. Kushmerek served as Fitchburg City Councilor for 7 years, I can't believe it, including 5 years as council president, during which time he became Fitchburg's youngest ever council president. Fueled by a passion to provide his region's residents with access to affordable higher education opportunities, Mike has held positions in higher education administration development at Northeastern University, Worcester Polytechnic Institute, and Fitchburg State University, where he earned a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in history. Rep. Kushmerek is passionate, you're going to hear about this, about dismantling financial and socioeconomic barriers to success and ensuring that everyone has an equitable opportunity to pursue their dreams and goals. Welcome, Mike. Former Representative Jen Benson joined AARP in June of 2024, serving now as the Massachusetts State Director. And let me just say, when I entered the legislature, Jen Benson was the bar. Everybody wanted to work as effectively and as strategically and as successfully as Rep. Benson. From 2003 to 2020, Rep. Benson served in elected office, first in the municipal office in Lunenburg, and then as state representative for the 37th Middlesex District, starting in 2009. During her time as state representative, Jen served as House Chair of the Joint Committees on Healthcare Financing, State Administration and Regulatory Oversight, and Consumer Protection and Professional Licensure, really important committees. While in the legislature, Rep. Benson championed legislation on the cutting edge of the issues of our day, including filing bills to grow the renewable energy economy, modernize our energy infrastructure, define biosimilar therapeutics, and to standardize, step therapy practices to better serve patients. That's just a few of the things that Rep. Benson focused on. Welcome, Mike and Joe, to Cup of Joe. Mike and Jen to Cup of Joe. Welcome to you both.
Thank you so much.
That was a long introduction. But perhaps we'll start with you, Rep. Kushmerek. Could you speak a little bit more about your journey to the legislature? You've had quite a life for such a wonderfully vibrant and young legislator before you got even to the House of Representatives. So we'd like to understand a little bit about how your path to service.
Well, with a 3.5-year-old at home, I don't feel young most days. So thank you for calling me that. I'll take it. Yeah, I think for me, my path to elected office was certainly not a linear one. And at no point really in my upbringing did I think it likely or really even possible to be an elected official. I grew up in the North Shore of Massachusetts, primarily in Lynn and Saugus, and grew up in a home that really struggled. My father was a union carpenter. I was one of 5 children, with a household really relied on food stamps and welfare to make the ends meet. And every winter season it was kind of a if fuel assistance doesn't come through, then it's going to be an exceptionally tight year, and Christmas is going to be a little bit lean. And those are just kind of the conversations around the dinner table most nights and most years. And both my parents really struggled with mental health and with substance use throughout their lifetime. And at age 17, I was the youngest of the 5 siblings and the last left at home, and realized my life was already kind of leading towards a path that didn't have a very prosperous future. And so I dropped out of high school and effectively ran away from home and my parents and found myself in Fitchburg. And through the good graces of Fitchburg State University, they accepted me as a high school dropout at age 17 in what should have been my senior year of high school. I was accepted into Fitchburg State, and my move and journey to Fitchburg gave me a new family and a community and a support system that I never had at any point really in my life. And in an incredibly formative 4 years at Fitchburg State, it really opened my eyes and my opportunities to a whole new future. And from that point forward, it really I felt like my path and my goal in life was to really serve a community that gave me everything. It gave me, a home, a hope, and now my family. I met my wife, who's a geriatric social worker, um, at Fitchburg State University, and together we have a 3.5-year-old child, and achieved home ownership and college education, both of us really, and finding kind of breaking generations of poverty in both of our families. And so from those experiences and those opportunities, really a desire and a calling to serve, to give back to a community that gave me so much. And we'll get into it a little bit later, but right after college, I found myself called back into my old life of both my parents aged tremendously during my time in college and were no longer in a position to really care for themselves. And at 22, 23 years old, I found myself going from, college parties and final exams to medication management and mass health paperwork um, and that really was an eye-opening experience for me. And it was that kind of reminder that this idea of bootstrapping in America, lift yourself up by your bootstraps. Anyone can do it. It's just a matter of sheer determination. It was that reminder of generational poverty and these cycles of poverty find their way of clawing you back and holding you back in ways didn't that don't seem possible. And when you're going through it, it seems near impossible to navigate or to succeed through. And um, at every turn it would felt like just kind of misfortune awaited, and that the path forward was going to get more and more difficult. And you know there was always those opportunities where I got earned a college degree, and now this is a chance to kind of go out on my own and have some financial independence and kind of reset the family fortune. And then it was always, something that really pulled you back. And it was eye-opening for me of it's not about, bootstrapping and sheer determination. It's often about, just for me, it ended up being, incredible luck of people who were willing to help me out, um, and opportunities where people were willing to help propel me forward. But if not for those opportunities, if not for, the incredible community in Fitchburg that gave me a chance to really propel my life forward, I wouldn't be here. And so I think that's really been my journey and what's been guiding me of, w- if we truly believe in the American dream and bootstrapping in America, then we need to recreate a system that's a little bit more equitable and much more supportive of people's ability to start anywhere in the socioeconomic spectrum and find their way into or to stay into the middle class. And for me, that's been kind of my guiding light, my guiding star there.
I love that you have a guiding light behind you. I will say that I heard, we were at an event together, Rep, and I heard the piece of your story that talked about you graduating from college and then automatically becoming a caregiver for your parents. And I thought, and I'm sure Rep Benson thought the same thing, Jen, I thought, oh my God, he is perfect. He is a perfect spokesperson for this bill. Your compassion and your own heart beating for this is, I find it transformative. So it inspires me to fight harder. So thank you so much. We'll move, if we can now, to Rep Benson. Jen, talk a little bit about your time in the legislature, what brought you there, what was powerful and good about that work, and then how did you get to the AARP? I feel we were so lucky that you landed there. And what's it like there, and how are you feeling the leadership of this bill as part of your work? So over to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your leadership. I just, when you came in to the legislature, I thought this is somebody I want to get to know and learn from. So, thank you for your generous introduction, but please, I mean, the feeling is definitely mutual. And I was fortunate to be able to work with Rep. Kushmerek early on because we were from neighboring communities. He was a city councilor. I would see him at events. And then when he decided to run for that seat, I thought, amazing. This is amazing. I get to work with this amazing person in the State House. And then I up and left. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry we didn't get to work together longer, but now we do on this. I share some of Mike's sort of experience. I grew up in a house. I grew up in New Hampshire, working class family, union members, and my dad suffered from mental illness. And so, and the impact that that had on the family and the stress. And I grew up in the 70s at a time when it never would have occurred to me at all to run for office. I was not a particularly great student. This was never a possibility for me, I thought. And I went to school. I got married young while I was in college, had actually my first daughter in my last year of college. And that was my life. And we had moved to Lunenburg, loved the community, had been, involved in the schools, had two more children. And then one day somebody came up to me and asked me if my husband would like to run for school committee. And so I decided at that point I would run for office. It was not a premeditated idea, but I thought who better to represent the families of Lunenburg than one of the moms, And so I worked hard at that. And then one day my predecessor called and said, you should consider running for my seat. I'll be running, for something else. And I said, oh, no. I can't do that. And that daughter who interrupted my college career was 13 and said, I know who that was, and you have to do it. So that's why I ran for state rep, because my daughter told me that normal people, which was shocking from a 13-year-old, but that I was normal. I was a normal person, and normal people have to be willing to serve. That's what democracy is all about. So I thought, I will never win this seat. There were 5 other people running in the primary. There was a general election. I will never win, but I will talk about public education and the environment. Those are my passionate issues. I at least can bring that to the fore. Well, suddenly everybody else dropped out of the primary and I won. And so then it became, what do I do with this power? And my time in the legislature was really about representing the people in my district. And there's 6 communities in my district at that time. The district has changed now. But really just bringing up, the same way I tried to in my campaign, bring up and work on the issues that are impacting people every day. And as I worked on this throughout my time in the legislature, there were many things that I would champion or file that others would say, that's a hot issue. Like that could cause you some problems in an election. And I said, I don't care, because my job is to do what I think is right, what my district thinks is right. And if I lose my seat over fighting for the right things, then I lose. And I feel like my whole career has kind of held that same mantra. I'm going to work for the right thing however I can. So I left the legislature in 2020. I went on to run a progressive business organization. We worked on a lot of public policy. I did that for 3 years. I worked for a couple years in the renewable energy industry as a consultant, and then I came to AARP. And AARP provided this opportunity to continue in that same vein. It is really the thing I love about it, and what I tell people about my job is I am essentially a lobbyist just for the people. That is, AARP has about 750,000 members in Massachusetts, and we work with so many more on top of that. My job is to represent their best interests, and that's it. It's so nice to have one single, client in my job, and it makes it really, really easy. And so as we were working on what are we going to prioritize this year, family caregiving was so clear. It was such a clear example of what everybody is experiencing right now. And we just last week had a survey in the field about family caregivers. And about 90% of the Massachusetts population has either been a caregiver, is a current caregiver, this is an unpaid family caregiver, or are expecting to be a caregiver at some point in their lives. So talk about a ubiquitous issue. Anybody who has a family, close, chosen family, have experienced some level of giving of themselves to that family. And we need to honor that, but also recognize its importance and how can we support them.
Thank you so much. And I just want to pause for a moment and just think with everybody listening about how many members AARP has, because in our work together with my constituents, we often talk about, the outside political pressure meeting inside advocates and then also inside leaders like Rep. Kushmerek on a bill, right? So it's almost as if, AARP is pushing into the legislature like you did when we had a hearing on our bill, the Act Supporting Family Caregivers, where you were able to, help marshal incredible voices. So it's just such an honor to be with you both in this incredible work. So important. So let's transition now just to more of the guts of the bill. Rep. Benson, could you expand a bit on the need for increased state support for family caregivers? You talked about the fact that every one of us is going to be a caregiver of a family member. Why should the state get involved? And what more can we do? What is the bill contemplating that the state can and should do?
Yeah, so one of the things we wanted to do is really feature unpaid family caregivers as a discrete group of people. So the legislature has in the past, in very recent past, looked at long-term care services, looked at community-based services, it's looked at, all the paid caregiving ecosystem that's out there. But a huge piece, whether in conjunction with those services or as freestanding care, are the unpaid family caregivers. They coordinate care. They do a lot of in-person care. And the amount of work they're doing represents about $15 billion worth of services for the Commonwealth. And so yes, it's critical, first of all, a critical piece of our overall care system, but their needs are not captured necessarily in these other opportunities, these other bills that had been talked about in the past. And the fact is, we really need those caregivers to continue doing what they are doing because they are filling gaps that the state, quite frankly, can't fill. And so we looked at some legislation that we have had filed or supported in the past, and some new pieces to help bring this all together in one large package that really touched on sort of the 360 supports for a family caregiver. So that's everything from a tax credit, $1,500 for those who are able to apply for that. That would be refunding some of the over $7,000 that family caregivers typically spend out of pocket. And that's on allowable things such as maybe a home improvement or other expenditures going into that care. Paying spouses as caregivers. Senator Comerford, you have championed this for a very long time. And the fact is, we have far too few personal caregivers, people who are paid for that role to fill the need. And many spouses are filling this need, but are doing it at a financial detriment to their family. And so to be able to say, a spouse, if you need to reduce hours or leave your job to be a caregiver, you are filling a role that the state may not be able to fill, and you should be paid for doing that work. Next, looking at respite care. So we have programs for people at the lower end of the socioeconomic scale who can get some respite care vouchers for those times when maybe you need to take care of yourself. And, you know, Rep Kushmerek talks about this really eloquently, but you know, many caregivers have their own children. They have their own medical needs. And it might be that they need to be able to place their loved one someplace safe in order to take care of their own doctor's appointments or their children. So making that more available to middle income families. And then looking at things like workforce needs. So if you need to take that time off, leave your job to be a caregiver full time, yes, we want to codify the current practice of being able to get unemployment for that, as well as making sure you're not forced out of your job because you're a caregiver and there may be some modest impacts to work. So we want to make sure these people are protected, they're supported, and they're able to continue doing that important job.
That was a great synopsis of the bill. And friends listening, spouses as caregivers is one of the big issues out here in Western Massachusetts. And it's bananas, frankly, that a niece, a nephew, a daughter, a cousin, even a divorced spouse can be paid for caregiving, but just not the spouse of the person. And this according to Mass Health. So we will keep fighting for this level playing field for spouses. And out here, we talk a lot about elder economic insecurity. And in Western Mass, it's pretty significant, the differential when a spouse is having to care for another spouse unpaid. And when, you know, we just think about a stipend being exceedingly helpful to help keep this family in their home. So thank you, Jen. Mike, talk about why this bill right now. So you took this up. You clearly are, as we said, you have a heart beating for this issue. Why should we tackle this right now in this legislative session, and why this comprehensive approach?
Yeah, so for me, this was really a driving force in maybe my political origin story, if you will. It was really the culminating moment for me that told me at some point um, I was going to have to work in this space and really try to work on reform and change and more support for caregivers. And I mentioned earlier that I 22 and 23 years old, I went from kind of a college focus to effectively being a full-time caregiver and guardian, making really complex and difficult decisions for two parents in a way that I didn't feel adequately resourced or educated on how to do. And we have some wonderful agencies. There's ASAP networks, aging service access points, throughout the Commonwealth that do a really fantastic job, and social workers and providing some additional wraparound support and services. But at the end of the day, the responsibility ultimately lies and rests with the caregivers that are going to get the call, at any hour of the day, no matter whether they're at work or doing anything else. And so, it was medication management, figuring out how to advocate, effectively to doctors, and, um, trying to, make sure that the house was clean, and the fridge was stocked with, with food, or, making sure that times with the meals were cooked, so that they didn't have to, or and then in and out of doctor's appointments and hospitals, and short-term care and long-term care, and figuring out how to navigate, power of attorney and healthcare proxies and mass health rep payee forms. And it was overwhelming all the time. And any hour of the day that I had where I wasn't working and trying to establish myself as a young professional, and trying to kind of achieve that financial independence, for the first time really in my family's history. I was spent as a caregiver, and while most of my peers were off, enjoying their 20s and early 30s, and my wife, my now wife, and I were, uh, you know, working full-time jobs to support my parents, and it was really the two of us together. And even that wasn't enough. And I felt like I could give all of myself, and it would not have been enough. And the experience was probably the most painful part of my life, and some of the most painful and darkest moments of my life. But on the other hand, it taught me more about myself, and was also such a rewarding experience on the other end of it. It taught me so much about compassion and about empathy, and forgiveness. I ran away from my parents effectively at 17, and I never went home. Really, again, I'd pop home for the weekends and do some laundry, and check in on them and see them at holidays, but I never moved back. I became a Fitchburg resident at 17, and I never left. And it uh, I'm forgetting where I'm going with this, but ultimately, it um, it became really just such a consuming experience, of caring for my parents, um, and uh, there was these particular moments where uh, my mother, in particular, struggling with mental health, needed the assistance of kind of the mental health system. We found ourselves doing multiple stops at geriatric geri psych units, around the state, and it was in the midst of really the ER boarding crisis and the mental health boarding crisis. And I find, myself at, I don't know, 25 years old, um, 20, maybe 26 years old. My mother has been in the Leominster ER for 6 days at that point. Um, the hospital was so full. She was in the hallway, and um, so they didn't even have a bed for her. She was waiting for a bed to free up somewhere in the state, at a geri psych unit. And in the meantime, she was just sitting there waiting. There's no medication management, really, just effectively waiting. And the experience broke my mother, and it broke me. And I remember sitting there by her bedside in the hallway, just sitting in a chair, and just, you know, she cried herself to sleep that night. Um, and I remember just sobbing in the hallway, and then going home that night, and kind of, just reflecting on, life can't possibly be this hard or this unfair. How can people go through this? and surely I'm not the only one going through this every day. And um, it just felt crushing. Like the weight of the world was just, falling on you. And it was really that night and in that moment where I made the decision at some point, somehow in my life, I'm going to be in a position where I can help others going through this. Because this can't be the way that the system is meant to operate. And this shouldn't be the way that this system functions. And there has to be more support for caregivers out there. And it was really that determination of somehow, somewhere, I'm going to make a difference in this space. And I was a young city councilor at that point, and really that was when I resolved, and I find myself about the same month that Jen Benson was announcing her resignation from the legislature. I was announcing my candidacy for it, um, and you know I realized along my campaign and that drive, and you find out a lot about yourself when you're knocking on doors and trying to explain to people because they're asking what. So why do you want to do this? Like, why you? And through that experience, you know, you spend a lot of time on self-reflection and thinking about those formative moments in your life and why you did the things and why the systems in place maybe need changing. And so I spent a lot of that time reflecting on, yes, the pain of that moment of being a caregiver, but also, yes, the empathy and compassion that come along with it and the forgiveness that comes along with that, but realizing that this system fundamentally needs to change and there needs to be more resources and um you know uh, and so um I find myself running on that as the issues of mental health, and just so honored to have in my first 2 years, and I won't take credit for it, but to be a part of a legislature that took up comprehensive mental health reform, and really looked at the mental health boarding crisis for what it is, and took long-term and short-term steps to really address that crisis, and it is improving. And so, and now, I found myself right after this last election cycle, kind of doing that inventory of, I've been in the legislature for 4 years, and did I do what I came here to do? And am I fulfilling my promise, not just to my constituents, but to myself? Um, and it was that weird, it was over the holidays, and you're kind of, you're getting you're through election cycle and the activity and the buzz, and then you're trying to reflect on, like, what are you going to do in the next session? What are you going to do in the next 2 years to go back and tell your voters, like, this is what I'm here, this is what I'm fighting for, and this is my reason for existing in the legislature. And I was kind of at a pain point of, like, I ran on this issue, and I'm kind of, I haven't done what I set out here to do, and I was kind of beating myself up a little bit. And I was going through that process of, all right, so what am I going to do about it now? And, like, how am I going to take my lived experience and convert that into a legislative solution? Um, Meanwhile, you're getting the phone calls constantly from your constituents talking about these issues. And as fate and fortune would have it, I like just this serendipitous moment of kind of like at the depths of my own internal despair of reflecting on why I hadn't done more to address this caregiving issue. I get a call from Jen Benson, like, "Hey, I'm new in this role. I'm looking to hit the ground running, and I want you to partner with Jo Comerford on a comprehensive omnibus caregiving bill." Um, and uh, I think I tripped over myself, and I think jumped through the phone and screamed yes in her ear. And it was like no questions asked. Like, yes, we're doing this. I'm in 100%. Um, and not only did that so align with my journey and who I am, and what I feel like my reason for being in the legislature, and why I feel like I'm on this earth. Uh, but also hitting this critical moment in time, this inflection point in our long-term care system. You know, this legislation is happening at a time and when our long-term care system is at its most fragile. We have long-term care facilities and nursing homes that are closing because of staffing and because the finances just don't work. In that space, you have workers that are retiring faster than we can educate and fill those positions, also coupled with just this immigration nightmare of, we're deporting the people that are doing the most critical works within this space, the CNAs and just the care the caregivers in our community who are just doing the work day in and day out to support our family caregivers and our social work and our human services sector. Um, and so and our ER as well, I think we've made, just remarkable steps in working towards freeing up beds for the mental health. What we're seeing right now is a new crisis emerging in our ERs and in our community hospitals, where you talk to hospitals about elders boarding in the ER for days, weeks, and months. Not because there are no beds in the state, but because there are beds that can't be staffed. And that is a whole other crisis, right? And you look at this same time, the only reason that the system is functional and the only reason that these problems you know, um, uh, aren't on the front page of every paper in our country is because there are family caregivers, this silent workforce, nearly 800,000 unpaid employees in Massachusetts who are going about this work day in and day out. Some that make my story just seem, so trivial, and others who are just plugging away each and every day with everything they've got, and without them, this whole system falls apart. And without them, we are truly in the midst of not just a human services crisis or a long-term care crisis. We're talking about a societal crisis were it not for these remarkable people, these superheroes in our community. I'm no longer a caregiver. My parents aren't with us. But I hear the stories each and every day, and I see it in my community, and we hear about it across the Commonwealth. These people, they need some help. They go to sleep every night, with the darkest moments that I shared with you, that's their reality most nights of wondering why life is so hard. And to me, they should be able to tell themselves tomorrow that they can go back to sleep because, finally somebody is there to care for them. And I believe fundamentally that is our job in government and in the nonprofit sector. And that's why I'm just so honored to work with AARP and Jen Benson, and with you, Joe. I mean, um, you know, we're uh, we're at this really critical moment, and we need, serious people, but we need compassionate people. And when we talk about, celebrating, women in government in the legislature just this other day, and I'm so just honored to work with two just compassionate leaders who have led their entire career with just such compassion and empathy for the people they serve. And this isn't the bill that grabs you the political headlines. This is not the bill that, it typically gets you the votes in your community. This is the bill that makes a difference in the lives of people. We're not doing it because, we're hearing about it on the headlines every day. You two are doing this work because it matters and it improves people's lives, and just could not be more privileged and honored to work with both of you on this.
Well, I think Jen's going to agree. I think we should just clip that call to action and show it at every hearing and to every member of our legislature in terms of why we need this bill. Thank you, Rep. Kushmerek. Thank you, Mike. Wow. So friends, we've got to pass this bill. As Rep. Benson said, we've been talking about spouses as caregivers. That has not advanced to the floor of either the House or the Senate. It's come out of committee because everybody agrees it's a good idea, but we haven't been able to get it over the line. And this is a bigger concept, answering the calls that both Jen and Mike talked to us about, right? Why do we need this now? What are the complexities of family caregivers? So we're going to wrap this up. Rep Benson and Rep Kushmerek, but what's the best thing people can do? Just, a couple of seconds from each of you on the best thing that people can do right now if they want to push this forward, this session.
Well, I guess I'll say, contact not only your state senator, state rep. Obviously, Senator Comerford knows this issue, Rep Kushmerek knows this issue, but lend them your support. But also send a note to the chairs of Ways and Means, the Speaker of the House, the Senate President. Let them know you are personally impacted by this. Because as much as we can give data and information, as you can see just from your podcast, your program today, Rep Kushmerek, this personal story cuts through all of it. It is so clear.
It's totally hearts and minds.
Absolutely. But it exemplifies just how hard it is. And it's being replicated in ERs and in homes across the Commonwealth. And we need to support these people who are sacrificing so much.
Thank you so much, Rep Benson, State Director for AARP in Massachusetts. Rep Kushmerek, any final words? Or your
Yeah,
call?
I'll just, I'll amplify exactly what Jen just shared and just say that, best thing you can do is to tell your story. I tell my story, it's agonizing, and I think it shows, and your viewers will see, I can't help but look down and stare down at my lap as I tell this story sometimes because it's hard. And it's hard for a lot of people. But tell your story because it is the most impactful thing. And those stories cut through our days as legislators. We get bombarded by policy discussions and budget figures every day. But those stories and that humanity of when people tell their story, their pain and their the triumphs and the despair, right? Tell those stories. It cuts through our day and it touches our soul and it compels us to action. My message to people is tell your story and share it. Yes, with your state legislators, but also share it with leadership, share it in the community, because so many caregivers, they're amazing caregivers because they focus on the people they care for. And they're not often thinking about themselves. But the best thing you can do, both for yourself and for the next generation of caregivers and all of the other caregivers out there, and for the loved one that you're trying to care for now, is to tell your story and to make sure that it's out there and it's in the public and that we're discussing it, that we're not whispering it in a corner, that we're not ashamed of our story as caregivers, but that we are proud to be caregivers and that we're proud to talk about the experiences in all of its glory and in all of its sadness. And that's okay to talk about. And we need to get it out there and we need to normalize it and socialize it as a topic that should be top of mind.
Absolutely.
That more than 1 in 10 people in Massachusetts are a caregiver right here, right now, in this moment. And we don't even know that we're out there, and that we have company in this. And so that is my plea to folks: is talk about it. Yes, talk about it with the legislature. Yes, share those stories with the leadership at House and Senate and with our governor and the executive branch colleagues. But share it with your neighbors and share it in your communities so that people are talking about this and they know that it should be an issue that deserves to be front and center in everybody's mind.
That's it. That's the call to action. Representative Mike Kushmerek, Representative Jen Benson of AARP. I'm really grateful to be with you. Let us make gains this session. Let's get this onto the floor of the House and the Senate and over the line at this really difficult time. Grateful for both of your work. And thanks so much for joining this podcast. So friends, we're going to close here with all my thanks for tuning in. I can't imagine a better duo to work with. And thanks for your listening. And we'll be back in touch in our district about ways to support this family caregiver bill. Take good care.